they just packed them on a bus without any direction.
We are New Yorkers. We welcome everybody in.
By no means is it anti-migrant or pro-migrant or whatever it may be.
We're just trying to get a better life here.
There's a reason that the Statue of Liberty sits in our harbor.
Empezando las selvas, nos quedamos sin comida.
Vimos cosas horribles, muertos.
En el río Bravo perdí un compañero, se lo llevó el río.
Yes, we are seeing around 69 different nationalities.
Nosotros venimos de Chile,
Honduras,
Venezuela. Hemos perdido todo por el sueño americano, por la familia de uno. Pero ya por lo menos, gracias a Dios, estamos aquí ya. Y bueno, a trabajar.
We are sending them to the United States Capitol where the Biden administration will be able to address the needs of the people that they are allowing to cross our border.
We greeted the first bus from the state of Texas.
If you came here on a Mayflower or on a bus at the Port Authority, you deserve dignity and respect.
Vine a Nueva York buscando una ayuda para mi esposa y mi hija.
Le llega una oportunidad en cualquier momento. Y yo estoy esperando mi oportunidad.
We have opened 11 emergency shelters, and we're going to continue to open those shelters.
Casi como una jaula.
The system is over capacity.
Today, I am declaring a state of emergency in the city of New York.
Immigration is a federal problem. It calls for a federal solution.
They're trying to fill labor needs that we have long had. We should be paving the pathways to make this as easy as possible.
From this moment on, it's downhill. There is no more room.
I don't think it's right that they put them in a hotel.
Taxpayers are paying all the expense.
If we don't find housing, you'll be seeing these individuals living on the streets of New York.
You are not welcome here.
We have no idea who's done what, who is who. Close the border.
We are tired of being called anti-immigrant. We all came from immigrants.
We came into this country legally. Why can't they?
They're seeking asylum in this country, and it's their legal right to do so.
When people are fleeing persecution, migration is not a choice.
We don't have better options, so we're just trying to get a better life here.
We continue to be a city of immigrants, but we are not a city of unlimited resources.
We had a $12 billion deficit. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City.
It's an early morning in Brooklyn, where a family of 4 Venezuelans are waking up to start their day. Meet Clara, her husband Jose, and their 2 children, 5-year-old Dylan and 10-year-old Antonella. They are among the more than 65,000 migrants currently in the city's care, living in a shelter in Brooklyn. On this Thursday morning, when New York One caught up with them, they were dropping their kids off at the bus stop.
¿Y en qué grado están?
Yo estoy de cuarto.
¿Cuarto? ¿Y usted, jovencito?
Dile, kinder.
While waiting, the children began to shiver. They aren't used to the cold of the city. In their hometown of Barquisimeto, Venezuela, it's warm year-round.
Es caliente, donde nosotros vivimos es caliente.
¿Y ustedes qué van a hacer para el
Mira
invierno?
cómo está.
Eso, usted necesita guantes.
Chao.
Nos vemos.
Clara's alarm clock goes off before everyone else to make sure the kids have had breakfast and have finished their homework.
Por lo menos el niño es el que más le cuesta. Sí. Le dice que no se quiere bañar.
Once she gets her coffee, she's off to the B44 bus stop. Clara just started a cleaning job in Sheepshead Bay. She needs to be there at 9 a.m.
De lunes a viernes.
Ajá. No, y los sábados también.
So, el único día libre es
El domingo, ajá.
The bus ride is only the first part of Clara's 40-minute trek to work. Then it's a 16-block walk to the house she cleans. This journey is much different than the one her family made to the U.S. The family left everything behind in April of this year. It was Clara who made the decision, and her husband, though hesitant, joined her. Along with their dog Star, they left their home with less than $50 to their names. This money was gone immediately once they reached the Darien Gap.
Nosotros entramos por Capurganá y cuando llegamos ahí vimos que nos metieron como en un galpón grande y habían unas personas que eran como los que mandaban ahí, a todos nos metieron ahí y teníamos que pagar para poder salir de ahí para ir a la selva, a otro campamento.
With no money left, Clara and Jose began to panic, but relied on their faith to stay optimistic.
Ay, Dios mío, bueno, yo le entregué todo mi viaje a Dios desde que salí, yo le entregué mi viaje a Dios.
Yo le dije a ella.
They traveled through 8 countries to various campsites along the way with little to no food.
Entonces, por lo menos, nos unimos varias familias. Yo pongo el arroz, yo pongo esto, así de poquito y comíamos una sola vez al día.
They say when those running the campsites along their journey asked for payment, Jose volunteered, doing manual labor in order to get the family out.
Y el señor le pagó y le dieron arroz y le dieron comida también.
Y me dio plata y esa misma plata llegamos y agarramos y compramos comida y la respondimos y al día siguiente nosotros salimos.
Ajá, al día siguiente salimos.
The family hit another roadblock at the Panama border. Jose felt ill. He drank water from the river. He laid on the ground for 3 days without eating, drinking, or moving.
Se quejaba. Y yo empecé a buscar a la gente porque ahí había Cruz Roja, ahí había mucha gente que ayudaban a las personas.
They were eventually able to cross the border into Costa Rica, where they continued by bus, passing through Nicaragua and Honduras. They were nearing the end. They passed through Guatemala next, then on to Tapachula, Mexico, before heading to Mexico City. They stayed here for 15 days, living at the North Central bus station, trying to save enough money to get to Juarez, their final stop before crossing into the United States.
De Guatemala hacia México.
One woman they met gave them hope. She successfully rode on La Bestia, or the Beast, the risky freight train that many migrants use to travel to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Me dijo por dónde me tenía que ir y todo lo que tenía que hacer. Y bueno, yo le dije a él, vámonos en el tren, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Y nos vinimos con la plata que él reunió, compramos comida porque sabíamos que eran varios días también en el tren.
At the end of June, they finally made it to the Texas border. They stood on line for hours before turning themselves into Customs and Border Protection. 2 months and 8 countries later, the family had made it to the U.S., relying on prayers, the generosity of others, and their strength. Fast forward 5 months later. On a cold afternoon in November, Jose is picking up his kids from the bus stop. Dylan and Antonella are learning English and are slowly adapting to the city's school system.
Oh, una amiga.
Siéntate, dila.
Yo tengo varios amigos, pero a veces no me entienden porque ellos hablan Rusia
Antonella said life in the city is much different than before.
La diferencia es que aquí podemos comprar comida en Venezuela no, porque ya está muy dura la situación allá, entonces no hay comida, no hay dinero, no hay casi nada allá. Aquí mi papá puede trabajar y podemos comprar comida.
Jose is also learning to adjust to life in the big city. He works part-time delivering food on a moped he borrowed from a friend.
Póngale que, pues, sabe que de Uber me queda muy difícil para yo trabajar así. Lo que se puede hacer que 300 en la semana, 250, todo depende.
Clara and Jose now have different dreams. They want to get their legal paperwork to then help the rest of their family get to the United States safely. For their kids, they want the American dream.
Para mis dos hijos, yo quisiera que hablaran inglés, que se acostumbraran como al ambiente de aquí.
Al clima, pues, al clima. Claro, al clima, al ambiente.
Tiempo, sí, al tiempo, sí. Al clima, a la cultura de aquí, que son muy diferentes de Venezuela. Que sean prácticamente como las personas de aquí.
Se siente bien porque aquí puedo estar más feliz, no puedo estar ya como en Venezuela, que eso era feo, eso no podíamos comer bien, en cambio aquí, no, aunque sea podemos comer algo bien, porque en Venezuela no me gustaba estar.
It has become a familiar sight on Staten Island. Police barricades lining the streets, marking sites of protest. Protests against the city's plan on how to handle the influx of migrants arriving in New York from the southern border. This is Island Shores in Midland Beach, a former senior living facility. The latest numbers from the city show it's now home to 185 migrants. That includes Rosa Velasco and her family.
Estadounidenses a gritarnos, insultarnos, hablarnos mal, hablan mal de todas las personas, que somos matones, asesinos.
Velasco, her husband, and their 2 children are from Ecuador.
El camino fue muy arriesgoso, muy duro para mí, para mis hijos. Fue duro, complicado y duro porque casi se me lo lleva a mi niño y a mi esposo también al Río Bravo.
Just a block away from Island Shores is Lada Doggy's Day Spa. Ina Ellen is the owner.
It's not comfortable for me or my customers. I would love the shelter to be someplace else.
What about it makes you feel uncomfortable?
This is a woman-running business. I'm here mostly by myself. I don't know who's in the shelter and how they're gonna act.
Ellen emigrated from Moldova 33 years ago.
There you go. Moldova was in the war, so we were running. It was Russia against Moldova, and it wasn't easy there. I was 19. My parents decided to keep me away from that war, and they sent me here.
She says she relates to the struggles many migrants face, but doesn't think a residential neighborhood with small businesses is the right place for a shelter.
I feel for them. They need help, but you can't take from one people and give it to another people. I didn't get no help.
Ellen says she's lost business because of protests, that barricades make it difficult for some dog owners to park close to her shop. Still, she believes residents should continue to demonstrate.
He walked to a villa, protests.
She's referring to the former St. John Villa Academy in Arrocar, an empty school which the city turned into a migrant shelter. For months, thousands from the community showed up night after night, calling on the city to shut it down. In October, the fire department issued a full vacate order, citing the building had no sprinkler system or working fire alarms. Staten Island Borough President Vito Fasella said 170 migrants occupied the site. According to City Hall, less than 2% of the newly arrived migrants are housed on Staten Island. This former hotel turned shelter on Wild Avenue in Travis has been open since October of last year.
No sé si yo me pueda quedar un año, o 6 meses, o 2 meses, o 3.
Gabriel Costello and his family have been staying at that site for more than a month. Costello, his wife, and their 3-year-old son made a 15-day journey from Ecuador to Arizona before getting on a bus to New York.
Es que salí de Ecuador, todo el viaje fue duro. Y es duro igual estar aquí, no es fácil, es bien duro. Por la falta de trabajo, la falta de que no se habla uno el inglés. Entonces son muchas cosas que, bueno, yo cuando salí de mi país dije, bueno, ya llego allá y llego y busco un trabajo y ya. Pero las cosas viendo la realidad no son así.
Costello, too, says migrants staying at the Wild Avenue site are welcomed by protests.
No me acuerdo del día exacto o la fecha, pero sí hicieron aquí afuera, hicieron un plantón de mucha gente pidiendo que nos vayamos.
By no means is it anti-migrant or pro-migrant or whatever it may be. It's all about accountability. It turns to a dump.
John Aspinall lives in Travis. He says protesters here are shedding light on quality of life issues they say have been caused by shelter residents.
The issues at hand are going to be driving with no license plates, driving with no licenses, driving and now crashing into vehicles in our community.
Aspinall says residents have noticed unlicensed vehicles or vehicles with fake plates parked in the shelter's lot. New York One was not allowed to walk onto the property, but while there, we saw a number of cars in the lot with no license plates, only one plate, or with paper plates.
Literally, as I was dropping my kids off at school, I circled back around. Someone came out of the shelter with no plates on their car. I followed them all the way to Forest Avenue taking a video, all the way back. No registration, no plates, no nothing.
He says that's just part of the problem.
The migrants come outside, go into the parking lot, and barbecue with propane tanks on the street. If you're going to be here, you have to follow the rules and protocol that every New York City citizen has to follow.
¿Han visto algún tipo de altercado o de gente que rompe las reglas, que no se acomoda? ¿Ha tenido alguna experiencia así?
No, la verdad no, yo no he visto ni tampoco he tenido algún problema con alguien o algo, no, porque nosotros pasamos en nuestra habitación y no estamos ni saliendo, nada, o sea, no hemos visto la verdad.
In a statement, a spokesperson for the Department of Social Services said in part, quote, "In order to maintain a safe and secure environment, on-site security is present at all DHS shelter facilities, and provider partner staff will meet with clients as necessary to discuss the importance of aligning with relevant laws, shelter rules, and good neighbor policies both in and around the facility." Despite all of the backlash, both Velasco and Costello still have dreams of making a life here in America with their families.
Nosotros venimos por un mejor futuro para mi hijo.
Ahorita me están ayudando con el estudio de mi hijo, pero el trabajo no lo veo que, o sea, no sé si nos están esperando que ayuda, pero eso sí, tenemos que esperar con paciencia y tranquilidad que nos ayuden un poco más.
Ya tengo un año que llegué, hasta hace unos meses fue que pude tener una guía migratoria y pude lo que es aplicar para un asilo político. Y en el transcurso del asilo político aquí estoy. Trabajo de delivery porque la verdad no tengo un empleo en el cual yo pueda sustentar a mi familia y me toca trabajar de delivery a diario.
Maria Angel loves to play chess. She started learning last year, thanks to an after-school club.
Pues al principio no sabía nada de ajedrez, solo sabía mover las piezas, pero mi profesora me ayudó a ir entendiendo más el ajedrez.
Maria Angel is one of 33,000 migrant students who have enrolled in public schools since the summer of 2022. She came to New York that October, and like many of her newly arrived peers, her journey from Colombia was traumatic. At the border, she and her parents were separated from her two older siblings.
Pues fue complicada y pues me asusté mucho cuando me separaron de mis hermanos.
It was a difficult, frightening journey until they were all reunited in New York. But it was a journey her parents felt they had no choice but to take. Alexandra Gomez and Francisco Vargas once ran a nonprofit that defended the rights of field workers in Colombia. They say one day their taxi was ambushed by armed men on motorcycles. They were thrown to the ground, had weapons pointed at their heads. The men said they knew where their children went to school, their schedules.
O sea, conocían toda mi historia, o sea, como si fuera un familiar que me conociera tanto. Entonces, a lo último, se subieron a las motos y me dijeron, yo de usted me voy del país. No la queremos volver, ni aquí ni en ninguna parte.
They traveled through Mexico and crossed the border from Piedras Negras to Eagle Pass, Texas on foot to seek asylum, a process that is ongoing. When they made it to New York, they applied for shelter and were placed in a midtown hotel. As her mom recounts the story, Maria Angel quietly cries. It's hard for all of them to talk about. One thing that's helped is school. She went to PS 11 last year, and this September started middle school at 75 Morton.
Ha servido como terapia porque ella se siente muy bien, ella siempre llega contenta.
Across the city, schools have rallied around children like Maria Angel, often with little notice and few resources to spare. New York One first visited PS 33 in Chelsea last October, shortly after 60 new students enrolled. About 80% of them are still there, and dozens more came after them.
From day one, any student who registers, there's just a lot of enthusiasm in being in school, and that hasn't changed.
Last year, PS 33 scrambled to establish transitional bilingual classes. This year, they're taking a different approach, putting students in mainstream classrooms with bilingual support, like this integrated co-teaching class of second graders, who are learning in two groups at different levels.
Some of the students who come in aren't strong in their native language. So a lot of the needs that they still have while they're still in second grade are actually more foundational skills.
Geraldine Harvey has been teaching for more than 30 years. Typically, she would have 2 or 3 English language learners a year. This year, it's 14, more than half her class. With the help of English as a new language teachers, paraprofessionals who speak Spanish, and a bit of Google Translate, there have been breakthroughs. A boy who had been apprehensive finally wrote letters for the first time.
He'll scribble. I have to hold his hand often, but he did this on his own today. So it was very emotional, I have to say. It was exciting.
Still, Harvey says schools like hers need more resources, like more bilingual paraprofessionals.
You really need the child to hear their language and understand. It's that entry point in.
Sometimes it's a kid who tries to fill that void for another, like Camilla Turk, who speaks a bit of Spanish.
I know, like, cámates, ¿qué pasas?
She works hard to understand the new students and to befriend them.
For so many families, for so many students, school is the one source of stability when everything else is unstable, unknown, ever-changing.
But Jennifer Pringle, project director at Advocates for Children, says that too may be upended. Mayor Adams has announced plans to limit some family shelter stays to 60 days. Families will either need to move out or be moved to another shelter. Under federal law, homeless children have the right to remain in the same school and be bused there.
No child is going to be displaced or their school is going to be interrupted.
But the city already struggles to staff the school bus routes it currently has. And if a family has moved a borough or two away, the school bus or subway ride back to their old school may be so difficult that families feel they have no choice but to change schools.
I think that is a right in name only. I think it's magical thinking.
Marie Angel's family hasn't received any notices about moving, but it's a fear that hangs over them, especially because her schools have been so welcoming.
Le dio ese afecto y ese cariño tan importante que la vinculó a la escuela como un miembro normalmente de la comunidad.
And she's making great progress at 75 Morton. Asked in English what her favorite subjects are, she replies,
Music and math.
More than a year after violence forced them to flee home, they say their new home, New York City, has been a blessing.
Que aquí, que en Estados Unidos, es un país garante de esa democracia, de esa protección de los derechos humanos. Por eso estamos acá.
Me gusta el movimiento de Nueva York y eso, pero se siente solo. O sea, porque si me hubiese venido con un familiar es diferente, platicas, pero aquí yo estoy sola. Ahorita que estoy haciendo amistades así, pero no es lo mismo que vengas con alguien de tu país, que ya te conozca desde pequeña o algo. Aquí no, aquí estás solo, encontrándote lo bueno y lo malo. Pero para adelante, todo es para adelante.
Mi hijo, el mayor, él se estaba ahogando. Él se me lo estaba llevando el río. Estaba la corriente bien fuerte y él se me lo estaba llevando. Y uno como madre en esa desesperación no sabíamos qué hacer. Mi esposo, perdón, pero no me gusta recordar ese pedacito.
While her husband was able to pull him to safety, the fear is still fresh in her memory, as Jesus del Carmen Sosa describes attempting to cross into the United States from Mexico. Carmen left her hometown of Esmeraldas on the coast of Ecuador with her husband and 5 children in the fall of 2021, fleeing the violence that has plagued her country in the last decade. They arrived in New York City early last year and are still trying to find a foothold in their new home. Today she has come to Bellevue Hospital with shoulder pain.
Y como mi esposo todavía no tiene un trabajo fijo para poder pagar un sitio donde llevarnos, entonces eso me desespera, me da ansiedad y desde ahí vengo con un dolor en toda la parte de aquí del hombro. Me duele mucho. Tengo 4 días así.
Like Carmen, more than 140,000 migrants seeking asylum have arrived in New York City over the past year and a half. Finding housing, work, and providing health care for these immigrants has been one of the biggest challenges facing the Adams administration.
As a healthcare provider, seeing the number of people come to New York City and the needs that they have, this is the definition of a crisis. People have been through multiple crises themselves, making their journey up here. We hear about children that have had to step over dead bodies. We hear about the trauma that parents have experienced. When people come through the front door of our arrival center here, people look scared.
Dr. Ted Long is the Senior Vice President of Ambulatory Care and Population Health at New York City Health and Hospitals, the largest public health care system in the U.S. Long has been tasked with leading New York's response to the influx of migrants. The Roosevelt Hotel serves as the city's main intake center for homeless migrants. New York One got access inside, where asylum seekers are screened for a variety of illnesses and diseases, such as COVID, tuberculosis, and chickenpox. Once here, they are reminded that no matter their immigration status, they will receive medical attention at no cost. Long says up to 500 people can walk through the door looking for help on any given day.
Everything we see here has been designed by New York City Health and Hospitals. We have doctors like me that are in charge here, and they put together the array of medical services based on what we saw asylum seekers or our patients needed.
One thing that stands out to those providing treatment is the large number of patients who have not had access to regular care, especially preventive care like common vaccinations. Long says the staff at the Roosevelt and other humanitarian centers have given over 50,000 vaccinations so far. Those vaccines are also a prerequisite for parents like Carmen, who have enrolled their kids in public schools in the city.
I assume you're working closely with the Department of Education as well, because a lot of these kids also will end up going to school, right? And there are certain requirements to go to school.
If you ask their family why, they haven't had the opportunity, or sometimes they're so expensive there that the family couldn't afford it. Here we fixed that immediately upon arrival to New York City.
Despite the large number of recent arrivals, Long emphasizes that this has not put a strain on the system. The numbers bear this out. There are close to 6 million outpatient visits a year at New York City health and hospitals, and so far, the number of migrant visits over this period of time has not exceeded 70,000. Screenings for depression are another important component of the healthcare services provided to the new arrivals. Masha Slavin is a primary care physician at Bellevue Hospital who has been working very closely with immigrant families and now those seeking asylum. She says it's not surprising to find so many of them suffering depression after their traumatic journeys.
Everyone who walks into our clinic, they're getting their blood pressure checked, but they're also getting a depression screening test. People have had really challenging situations in their home country, often have had a very difficult journey.
Those experiences, especially in the Darien jungle, still haunt Carmen and her children. She says she's in the process of setting up appointments for her and her kids to speak to a mental health specialist.
Y decirme, mamá, pero ¿por qué hicimos esto? ¿Por qué nos metimos acá? He sentido la necesidad de, por todo lo que estoy pasando ahora, de regresarme, pero me pongo a pensar todo lo que sufrí con mis hijos en esa selva. Los arriesgué, casi se me muere mi esposo, mi niña, y eso me mantiene aquí todavía, luchando por un futuro para mis hijos.
El sueño americano es que los niños tengan buen futuro, que estudien, sean alguien en la vida. Los otros venimos para acá a luchar para acá y echarle pierna por los niños.
Governor, thank you for spending some time with us.
Sure.
You have extended your executive order declaring a disaster emergency regarding the migrants. Is that going to continue indefinitely, or will you at some point go to the legislature and try to set up some conditions that are going to last as long as this situation lasts?
Well, what this does is it allows me to expend resources at this time because the legislature has not been there since June. I have had to pay for National Guard. We have over 2,000 National Guard members who are literally going in and helping set up shelters, building cribs, helping get groceries. I mean, they're really hands-on, and they're doing an extraordinary job. So to pay for that, to pay for the legal service, there's a lot of services that we're providing. Mm-hmm. And for me to be able to do that when they're not in session, it's outside the budget, this is a humanitarian crisis. And I had to have the powers to control the purse right now so I can make sure we spend this emergency funding. So we can talk about it with the legislature, but clearly this is going to have to be addressed in the next session as well because the numbers have not gone down. People are still coming here. We're getting about 2,500 to 3,000 a week. And we continue to build shelters and work toward getting people jobs. So this is not going to be gone anytime soon. We know the federal government needs to give us more money. That's a big issue for us, but I don't see that happening in the short term.
Well, even 7 or 8 months in advance of his budget deadline, the mayor of New York City has ordered deep budget cuts based on what he expects is going to happen with taking care of the migrant situation, projecting $12 billion over the next 3 years. What do your budget people tell you, even in advance of the formal process that kicks off in January, about how much this is likely to cost the state?
Well, we're already in for almost $2 billion. By the end of our fiscal year, it'll be $2 billion, and we had budgeted $1 billion. So we're already double what we expected right there. So when I go back and I'm right now preparing my budget, I have to look at where we're going to spend the finite dollars that we have. I don't think that we can continue paying for hotels for people in Midtown Manhattan, which are very expensive, especially through the holidays, indefinitely, and have our doors open to the entire world. I mean, there's 8 billion people. So the idea that we can continue providing that level of care is not sustainable. But that being said, people cannot be left on the streets. So that's why we have invested significant dollars in Creedmoor, building 1,000 units there. Floyd Bennett Field, there's 2,000 spaces there, 1,000 available today. So to make sure that as the weather gets colder, there's nobody who has to stay on the streets. We won't let that happen.
With the emergency declaration in place, why not require all counties to pitch in and help, as opposed to having what in effect is New York City, plus 57 other policies, all kind of going in different directions?
These individuals came to New York City because they want to be in New York City. New York City, and we know why it's so spectacular, but there are jobs. They're not necessarily legal jobs, but a lot of the individuals who've left the shelters and not returned have found employment in the underground economy. That's not very available in upstate New York. There's a different culture. Employers are not employing people without legal papers. Secondly, transportation. We have all the transportation networks to get people to jobs. Migrants don't have driver's licenses and they don't have a car. That's how you survive in upstate New York. So there's realities, and even the ones who've been sent up there wanted to come back as soon as they could, because there's now more people from their country, Venezuelans and Ecuadorians. And so they wanted one thing, they want a job. I've been focused on getting them jobs, and I have jobs waiting for them upstate. I have 1,000 employers, half of which are in upstate New York, who said, we'll take them tomorrow. Just get that work authorization. I have 2,500 people every single day working on this crisis to get them jobs, get them out of the shelters, and let them have the life that they came here for, like all of our ancestors did.
You've been speaking with White House officials frequently. At one point, I believe you told me it was every day. You recently made a trip to Washington, D.C. Has the White House held up their end of the bargain, what they've promised you, or at least suggested that they might be able to do for New York?
Yes. I mean, at first, they didn't think they could deliver the thousands of opportunities for Venezuelans. That was our first plea. You need to let these people work. This was the country the most were coming from. They're leaving severe violence and a dictatorship, and the economy has imploded. So can you let the Venezuelans work? They worked it out with us, and we got them to yes. Now they have sent people to help staff it. There used to be one facility to process people 70 a day. We ramped it up. There's now 4, we'll be approaching 500 applications for work a day. So we're starting to get ahead of this now. I don't see it's going to be gone anytime soon, but we're in a far better place, and the federal government did step up and help us there. Now they're also asking on our behalf for $14 billion from the legislature, from Congress, part of which will go to communities like New York. Part of it is to bulk up the border. There should be a decompression strategy at the border where people can be processed, vetted, and sent to other places around the country instead of just open doors and they come to New York because they've all heard of New York. They've heard of how great it is here. So.
Right. There's been some controversy and pushback around one of the deals that you made with the federal government, which is Floyd Bennett Field, and using it as a center. As you mentioned, about half of the beds that are available are not being used, and we've certainly seen footage of people getting off the bus, looking at the center, getting back on the bus and saying, it's too remote, this isn't going to work for us. Have you seen the center? It really is pretty far out there.
My job is to build capacity. I had the federal government. It's a federal problem. So give me federal space. We worked hard to get this. So it's outside of neighborhoods, indeed, but it's not disruptive to neighborhoods. But there's bus lines. I'm now paying for additional bus lines to take people from there to subway stations, to trains, and to jobs. Is it ideal? No. But it's a temporary emergency shelter that has capacity for the families that are arriving, because again, it's unsustainable to put people for a year and a half now, 2 years, in midtown hotels. Can't afford it. We don't want any more cuts in the city. We don't want cuts in state services. So we have to manage this. So the facility has heating and air conditioning and restroom facilities, and we don't allow people with family, with children, to be on the streets of New York. This is available with extra capacity right now for anyone who finds themselves in that dire situation.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, it sounds like, to move ahead to a possible end game about where all of this ends up, is the emergency capacity, temporary beds, the processing capacity so that people can get their work authorizations and their asylum claims in motion. And then one last piece of the puzzle might be resettlement, including in places upstate where there are jobs available.
We have a resettlement policy that when people can legally work, the state will pay for their housing for 1 year. So we are making it even more enticing. But the problem is, as I've said loud and clear, we have a shortage of housing, not just in the city. We have a shortage of housing that's affordable all over the state of New York. So I can't even say there'd be a landlord who'd be able to accept someone who can work legally, because we are at capacity everywhere. So that's part of the challenge as well. We don't want people to spend any more time in a shelter than necessary, but we also then have to find the apartments once they get those first paychecks. But the state of New York is committed to covering the costs for them to live once they have that work authorization upstate or wherever for a solid year. As I said, I have 20,000 jobs waiting for them upstate, 20,000 downstate. So there is an end game. The problem for us right now, we still have 2,500 to 3,500 people coming every week, every single week. That is not abating. That's why we need a border strategy that's going to work.
Mira, para nosotros el sueño americano de todo inmigrante es tener una vida, una estabilidad económica, financiera, y tanto financiera como emocional, ¿no? Poder ayudar a nuestra familia, comprarse de sus cositas, ¿no? Como todo mundo, tener una moto, un carro, una vida crediticia. Ese es el sueño americano.
We are migrants. I'm a migrant, and I know what it's like to be here. I can't imagine coming here with nothing and no one to guide me.
I've went in the shelter system, I've been in group homes, I've been in the streets.
I felt an obligation for us to respond. It was important to show them that, yes, you're welcome, and I wish the best for you.
When I look at these people with kids, young as my grandkids, and you've walked through several countries to get to where I was born, it says something to you.
Try to be a welcoming force, to live up to what America is all about, what New York City, having the Statue of Liberty in our harbor is all about.
I know that these kids have gone through a lot. I just want to help them get a sense of community.
It's fulfilling to know that we're doing something that's worthwhile, that is helping people. And you feel good when you know you can give back.
These kids remind me of myself when I was younger. They really just deserve the opportunity to succeed.
What keeps me going is seeing the people that keep showing up with hope, regardless of the adversity that they've gone through, regardless of the journey that they've been through, just having that glimmer of hope.
It's great seeing how much hope they have in a future of life in New York City.
Human beings have always found a way to communicate, especially where there's love. And there's certainly a lot of love among these volunteers and these asylum seekers.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.